What does the open source attribute of the main question was, what does the open source attribute of a company means to you as an investor? Like, what kind of other metrics or other criteria does this add?
Yeah, so I think there's different things that I look for, and open source is not one thing, it's many things, and the way in which it can manifest is very situational and context specific. So for some open source companies, they really emphasize that because there's a community and there's an external contributor base actually making the project better and contributing code and patching, issues, that the engineering cost to the company is much less. And in fact, they're actually getting this almost like subsidized sort of like lift from the community purely on engineering. Other projects don't have any external contributors. All the engineering is done by the company, one company. And however, they have a lot of users. They have a lot of developers. And so those companies would emphasize the adoption benefits of open source, which is to say it's frictionless. It delivers a lot of value for a developer. And as a consequence, there's a lot of adoption that if you had a proprietary product, maybe the adoption would be more expensive, or maybe you would have to spend money on advertising, or maybe you would have to like run some campaigns to acquire users. As a VC, I've invested in a lot of open source companies, deployed a couple $100 million in them. I think I manage a pretty small fund. So like most of the bigger funds have deployed billions of dollars in actually open source companies. So we haven't, but in terms of the magnitude of money, it's very small. In terms of the number of companies, it's very significant. So dozens of companies. We have invested, just as the one concise way that I can describe this, and this is after many years of like learnings. We've invested in companies that at incorporation, when we invested, we bought 10 or 15% of the company for a few $1 million. And if you were to look in many instances in our portfolio, there's probably 10 or so instances like this. If the technology were proprietary, the cost that would have had to go into building that technology and acquiring the same types of engineering efficiency and adoption benefits would probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of hundreds of millions of dollars, right? And where we invested and we bought 10 or 15% of the company for a few $1 million. Seems like a pretty good trade, right? Only when you then start to look at it, is much harder to monetize, and it's much more difficult to build a product that is differentiated in the eyes of the end user customer for many different reasons. So that's generally how I look at it. And I think this also translates into like the kind of founder that chooses to build these kinds of companies has to sign up for that additional level of difficulty and complexity. And I think it's extremely difficult to do. I think it's the most incredible decisions that you can make as a founder, because it is already extremely hard to start a startup and build a company from nothing. Umar knows, and also working with many startups at YC, it's just super hard, right? Like most of the time you die and you don't succeed. Doing an open source company is like hard squared times 10 or like times 100 or something like that. It's really hard. But I think it's better for the world, and it's a good decision. When it can work, it's a really great thing to do.